We're not paying a dime. My husband and in-laws took over the house I built alone. I paid for every brick, every board. Every breath of that home was mine. Then they moved in uninvited, entitled, and unapologetic. My husband handed them the keys. I handed him a contract. They thought I'd cry. I didn't. I packed. I left. And I made sure they paid, just not in cash. It started with a voice. His mother's, sharp and smug. We're not paying a dime, Gwen. You built it, we'll live in it. Just like that. Like it was normal. Like I was the one being difficult. I stood there in shock. Not because they wanted to move in, but because Richard, the man I married, just watched. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Just handed over the keys. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just a house. It was my house. My savings. My name on the deed. My dream. And they walked in like they owned it. That was the moment something snapped. Not loud. Not messy. Just final. I smiled. Then I reached for the drawer where I kept the contract. They had no idea what was coming. I never imagined I'd have to defend something I built with my own hands. Not figuratively, literally. See, 2 years ago, I bought a patch of land just outside town. Quiet. Wooded. Peaceful. It was mine. Every inch. I had the deed, the survey maps, the zoning permits. I handled it all. Alone. Richard didn't mind. Or at least, he didn't say he did. He even joked that his name didn't need to be on anything, as long as the fridge stays full and the bed stays warm. I laughed at the time. That laugh wouldn't age well. I paid the deposit in full with money I'd saved for over a decade, working corporate jobs, freelancing nights, canceling trips, skipping luxuries. I made sacrifices no one else saw. I didn't inherit money. I didn't marry rich. I just worked. When the construction began, I was the one meeting contractors before work. I was the one comparing bids, watching roof angles, learning about septic systems on YouTube at 2 a.m. Richard would ask, "Want me to come?" But I knew he didn't really mean it. He said he'd just slow things down. I didn't complain. I liked having control. I liked knowing the exact shade of cedar stain going on the deck. I liked choosing a kitchen layout that made sense for me. For us. But somewhere along the way, the us started feeling a lot like me. Richard's parents lived in the city, an hour away. We weren't close. Susan, his mother, had always been distant in that condescending, polite way. You know the kind, smiles like ice, eyes that scan you for flaws. Walter was less subtle. Blunt, gruff, and quick to remind you how things were done in his day. Still, I tried to be respectful. We invited them over for holidays. Sent birthday cards. Called on Sundays. I never gave them a reason to dislike me. But they never warmed up. Not really. The trouble started subtly. One afternoon, Susan dropped by while I was choosing backsplash tiles. I didn't know she had Richard's spare key. "Oh, this is cute," she said, looking around like she was critiquing a rental unit. "Is that the guest room?" I blinked. "No, that's my office." She tilted her head. Could always change it, I suppose. That evening, I told Richard the first wasn't comfortable with his mom letting herself in. He shrugged. Said she was just curious, and that it was nice she's taking an interest. It escalated from there. Blueprints started disappearing from the kitchen counter. Furniture catalogs would show up in the mailbox, ones I hadn't ordered. Susan started suggesting paint colors. Then appliances. Then curtain rods. Walter wasn't far behind. "Where's the second living room?" he barked during one visit. "You'll want a den. A proper TV space." "What are you gonna do? Watch Jeopardy in the kitchen?" I laughed it off, but it stuck with me. I started to feel like a visitor in my own process. Then came the talk. The one that flipped everything. Richard casually mentioned we should consider moving his parents in temporarily after the house was finished. "Just until they figure out their next step," he said. I stopped mid-step. "Next step?" "They haven't said anything to me. They were just tossing ideas around." "Don't take it so seriously," he said, brushing it off. But something in his voice sounded practiced. Planned. Later that week, I overheard Susan telling a friend on speakerphone, "Well, Gwen has her little space upstairs, and we'll take the 2 downstairs bedrooms." We'll take bedrooms. Plural. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan in our rental apartment. A thought bloomed in my chest like a slow-growing fire. They weren't asking. They were already moving in. And Richard? He was just holding the door open. After that night, everything started shifting. Subtly at first. Like the wind changing before a storm. Richard's parents began showing up more often. Not just dropping by, settling in. They'd walk through the frame of our half-built house like they owned the blueprints. Susan would trail behind with a clipboard. Walter would bark suggestions at the contractors, completely ignoring me. They started referring to rooms by name. Our room. The den. The sunroom for morning tea. I hadn't agreed to any of that. But Richard? He said nothing. He'd glance at me sometimes. Shrug. Mouth, just go with it. So I did. For a while. I told myself I was overreacting. That it was just temporary. That once we moved in, the boundaries would return. They didn't. One Saturday, I walked into the site and found Susan talking to the interior designer I had hired, the one I'd paid out of pocket. She was flipping through fabric swatches like she ran the project. I told her we prefer neutrals. She smiled at me like she'd done me a favor. We. Not you. Not Gwen. We. Later that night, I asked Richard, point blank, what was going on. Why are your parents acting like they're part of this? He didn't even look up from his phone. They're just excited. Let them feel involved. But it's not their house. He paused. It'll be everyone's house. One big family. Isn't that what you wanted? No. No, it wasn't. I never agreed to that. The next day, Walter showed up with a measuring tape. Said he needed to get the specs right for our new recliner. I stood there, stunned. Your recliner? He blinked. Susan and I picked out furniture. Figured we'd contribute that way, since you're covering the rest. He said it like I should be grateful. That night, I found Susan alone in the kitchen of our rental, sipping tea like she lived there. She looked at me over the rim of her mug. You know, Gwen, marriage isn't just between two people. It's between families. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I walked into our bedroom and stared at the closed drawer where I kept all the documents, title deeds, loan agreements, proof of payment. It was all there. In black and white. My name, my investment, my home. But none of it seemed to matter anymore. Because every time I pushed back, Richard pushed harder. You're being difficult, he'd say. They're trying to help. This is how families work. No. This is how control works. How gaslighting works. I started feeling like a tenant in my own dream. Like the house I built was becoming a cage. That's when I knew. If I didn't do something soon, I'd be outnumbered. Overrun. And worst of all, erased. So I stopped waiting. Stopped explaining. Stopped asking for permission. I started watching, listening, and preparing. They thought I was being quiet. I was just getting ready. It happened on a Tuesday. I was cleaning out the junk drawer, the one in the hallway that collects old keys, dead batteries, random papers you mean to throw out but never do. Buried under a stack of receipts and expired coupons was an envelope I didn't recognize. My name wasn't on it, but it was open. Inside were court documents. Divorce records. From Richard's previous marriage. We didn't talk about his ex much. Just vague mentions, didn't work out, mutual decision. She wasn't ready for family life. But these papers told a different story. She had filed for divorce. Over property. Over a house. A house she had paid for. There was a clause tucked at the bottom, stating she'd surrendered the deed to avoid further conflict. And the signature beside it was hers. I felt a chill run through me. No. This couldn't be a pattern. I put the documents back and closed the drawer. Tried to breathe. Tried to unsee what I'd just read. But then, 3 days later, Susan slipped up. She was on the phone, speaker on, talking to someone from her church group. I wasn't even eavesdropping. I was making coffee. She said, so casually. Well, Richard handled it beautifully last time. This one's even easier. Gwen's not confrontational. This one. Like I was an interchangeable piece. A phase. Another stepping stone. I didn't say a word. I just stared into the dark swirl in my coffee and felt the pit in my stomach turn to stone. They had done this before. And they thought they could do it again. Only this time, they miscalculated. Because I wasn't the same woman they thought I was. And I wasn't about to be written out of my own story. That was the moment it stopped being personal. It became strategic. They were playing a game. They didn't know I had just picked up the rulebook. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. Made coffee. Black. No sugar. No cream. No softness. I sat at the table with a legal pad and a pen. And I started writing. Not a journal. Not a letter. A list. Every cent I had put into the house. Lot purchase. Architect fees. Foundation. Framing. Roofing. Materials. Permits. Labor. Even the damn mailbox. I itemized everything. Down to the rug Susan insulted and the cabinet Walter tried to rearrange. And then I opened the drawer. The one where I kept the contract Richard signed. The loan agreement. Months ago, I had asked him to sign it. Just for security. Just in case. He thought it was romantic. Oh, you don't trust me? He teased. I laughed. Said I just like things tidy. He signed without reading it. I had the original. Notarized. Legally binding. It stated that the $350,000 I contributed was a personal loan, repayable upon dissolution of the marriage. It also included a waiver of claim to the property unless repayment was made in full. I'd tucked it away and forgotten about it. Now it felt like a life raft. Over the next week, I stopped reacting. No more snapping. No more arguing. No more pleading. Instead, I watched. I recorded. I collected. I saved voicemails, emails, casual remarks like when Walter said, "Gwen's lucky we're not charging her rent." Or when Susan laughed. "Once we're on that property, there's no kicking us out." They had no idea I was listening, let alone preparing. I met with a lawyer, discreetly. Slid the contract across her desk. She blinked. Read. Smiled. "You're smarter than most," she said. I didn't feel smart. I felt furious. We outlined a strategy. Serve papers. Secure financials. Record every incident. I installed a motion-activated camera on the front porch. Put a password on the Wi-Fi. Changed my iCloud login. Small things. Quiet things. But they made me feel less trapped. Richard noticed. "Why so quiet lately?" he asked. "Just tired," I said. Not a lie. Then came the day I knew would happen. The furniture truck. It pulled into the driveway like it belonged there. Richard's parents arrived with boxes, actual boxes. No warning. No discussion. No shame. They stepped inside like they'd always lived there. Susan tossed her scarf on my armchair. Walter walked straight to the fridge. Richard followed behind them, holding a clipboard and acting like this was all perfectly normal. I said nothing. I just stood at the top of the stairs, watching. At dinner that night, Susan said, "We'll start unpacking tomorrow. Walter wants the corner room, for the light." She smiled, as if I was going to ask her what curtains she preferred. I stood up, cleared the dishes, went to the guest room, and locked the door behind me. I opened my laptop, transferred every recording to an external drive, backed it up twice, typed a timeline of events. Date, time, incident, witness. When I finished, I stared at the screen. At the file named Contingency Plan, Holloway Residence. That's when I knew. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a case. And I was going to win it. Not by yelling. Not by begging. But by being 4 steps ahead. They thought I was being passive. I was being precise. They thought I was tolerating them. I was documenting them. And when the time came, I'd have everything I needed. It happened on a Sunday. The sky was gray. The air thick. The kind of weather that feels like something's about to snap. I had just finished vacuuming the upstairs hallway when I heard shouting from downstairs. Boxes were being dragged. Furniture scraped across the floor. I walked down slowly. Not rushed. Not panicked. Just ready. Richard's parents were in full takeover mode. Susan was directing movers like she ran a company. Walter stood in the foyer, hands on hips, barking orders about where the recliner should go. Richard? He was standing by the door, nodding along, holding a clipboard, smiling. I stopped at the bottom step, cleared my throat. They all turned. "I wasn't told anyone was moving in today," I said calmly. Susan rolled her eyes. "We already spoke to Richard." Walter added, "What's the problem? We're family." I looked at Richard. He didn't say a word. Didn't look guilty. Didn't look proud. Just indifferent. I felt something inside me click. Not break, click. Like a gear locking into place. "This isn't happening," I said. Susan scoffed. "You don't get to make that call alone, Gwen. This is Richard's house, too." That's when I smiled. Just a small one. Nothing dramatic. Actually, it's not. I walked over to the entry table, pulled out the drawer, took out the folder. I opened it, pulled out the loan agreement, signed, notarized. Then the deed in my name only. Then a printout of the bank transfers. Every dollar. I laid them on the table. One by one. Deliberate. Richard stepped forward, brow furrowed. "Gwen, what are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago." Walter scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're going to throw family out over paperwork." "No," I said. "I'm throwing strangers out over trespassing." Susan's face strained. She reached for one of the papers. I pulled it back. "This is a legal loan. Richard owes me $350,000. As per the agreement, if the marriage dissolves and repayment isn't made, he forfeits any claim to this house." I turned to Richard. "You signed it." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. I continued. "You knew this was mine. From the beginning. You didn't contribute a cent. You let them bulldoze over every choice I made. You let them move in without asking. You thought I'd just take it. Susan started to speak. I held up a hand. I'm done being interrupted in my own house. There was silence. Thick. Heavy. Then, I picked up the folder and walked toward the door. I'm heading to my lawyer's office. You have until tomorrow morning to remove your belongings. Walter growled, and if we don't, I met his eyes. I'll file for trespassing. And seek damages. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't slam a door. I just left. And, for the first time in months, I could breathe. I didn't go back to the house that night. Instead, I drove to my parents' place. I walked in with nothing but a backpack, my laptop, and a folder full of legal documents. My mom opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "The guest room's already made." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No passive-aggressive remarks. No footsteps in the hallway. No cold silences over dinner. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that doesn't make you anxious. The kind that lets you heal. The next morning, I filed for divorce. My lawyer moved fast. She delivered the paperwork to Richard that afternoon. Apparently, Susan opened the door and slammed it shut without saying a word. Within a week, movers cleared out their things. Not just from the house, from my life. Richard called. Once. I let it ring. Then blocked the number. He sent emails rambling, vague, half apologetic. Too late. Too empty. He said he'd never expected me to go that far. As if defending myself was excessive. As if reclaiming what I built was spiteful. But I didn't care. Not anymore. The house sat quiet for a while. I didn't rush to move back in. I wanted to feel good about that space again. Wanted it to be mine again. So I repainted the walls. Changed the locks. Donated the furniture they left behind. I planted a tree in the backyard, a dogwood. Soft blossoms. Strong roots. It felt symbolic. By spring, the house felt different. Not haunted. Not heavy. Just mine. I hosted my parents for brunch one Sunday. My dad sat on the deck and said, "Feels like peace lives here now." He was right. People think freedom is loud, slamming doors, screaming matches, walking out in the rain. But real freedom? It's calm. It's clear. It's walking into your kitchen, barefoot, and knowing no one will question your choices. I didn't leave with bitterness. I left with proof. Proof that I'd been right to trust myself. Proof that quiet power is still power. They thought they could erase me. Instead, I reclaimed everything. 3 months later, I got an email. Subject line, from Richard. No greeting. Just a wall of text, messy, rushed, almost desperate. He said the house had drained him. That selling it was the only way he could repay the loan. They found a buyer, but well below market value. He had to take out a loan to cover the difference. He moved back into his parents' old house. And apparently, his sister had moved in too. With her 2 teenage sons. 6 adults. 1 bathroom. He called it unsustainable. He said he missed Ella. We never had kids, but apparently that was the name of the dog they adopted after I left. Ironic. He ended the message with, "You were always smarter. I just never thought you'd actually leave." I didn't reply. I archived it. Then I blocked that address, too. Because by then, my life had shifted. I'd started spending weekends at a cabin near the lake, quiet, calm, mine. No one asking for keys. No one rearranging rooms behind my back. One weekend, while browsing a local bookstore, I met someone. A quiet man with kind eyes. Divorced like me. Careful like me. We talked for hours about nothing. And it felt like everything. We're not rushing into anything. There's no blueprint. No big plans. Just room. For me. For him. For peace. Last week, he asked what I'd want in a home if I ever built another one. I smiled. Nothing fancy, I said. A porch. A fireplace. And doors that only I have the keys to. He didn't laugh. He just nodded. And said, "I'd build that with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. They thought they broke me. They just cleared the ground. So I could start again. And this time, I'm building it all on my terms.